This episode of the Disruption Lab is taped in front of a live studio audience. Travis, you've spent 12 years in the Missouri legislature building policy infrastructure for the state's innovation economy. STEM mandates, Right to Start Act, Center for Entrepreneurship, Office of Entrepreneurship. And then instead of running for reelection, you decided to actually come and run some of the stuff that you've actually built and helped develop over time. So what was that moment that you realized that you'd rather be inside working than continuing to build from the outside?
Well, first, thanks for having me. This is really fun. I love being here with you all. I'd say there was always a passion for entrepreneurship long before I was in the legislature. I think as I studied it, seeing the economic impact that startups have, knowing and then starting to study the data. Ian Hathaway became a buddy of mine, and reading his books and about community development and how the state doesn't really do a great job of managing local ecosystems. It's the people on the ground that know their communities, that know what they're doing. It's the startups that need that little bit of help to get across the chasm of risk they've taken. Those things just excite me to no end. And my legislative career has been I've been on a mission. You know, when I went and knocked doors endlessly, I've worked incredibly hard to be where I am in the legislative process. Every day I was telling people my mission is to do these things, is to be there to fight for you for these things. And as I looked at my political career in the future, and I was on the board of the Missouri Technology Corporation as a House member because I saw the value and saw the importance of it. I begged to be on the board when I became a senator so I could continue that service. I just really thought the Missouri Technology Corporation was such an incredible way to catalyze entrepreneurship in the state and a great mission to continue on. So I'm not leaving the legislature because it's hard, because it is. I'm leaving because we saw this new mission that I could be on right now that we could be really excited about. Not only just me individually, but as a family, as a community. My legislative career was spent in large part thinking about entrepreneurs and thinking about economic development policy. Some things that I'll always be very thankful for, efforts around establishing the Office of Entrepreneurship, which has now become legislative policy around the country, which I'm extremely proud of. And then sitting down with Tasia Gordon when she first got the job to lead that organization, and to hear her vision for it was exactly what I was thinking when we established the policy, because it's not really expansive in our state statute. It's just basically economic development will have an Office of Entrepreneurship. So it was really up to DED to decide what that was going to look like. But Tasia came in and she's really embraced the thought and the heart behind that. So that's stuff like that just really drives me. And so this mission to fight for entrepreneurs made a ton of sense. And when the job opened up, it was something that I was ready to leap through.
So when I think about where MTC sits, you know, the role with the legislature, the role with DED, you know, the SSBCI dollars that come in, and how, I mean, it's multiple masters, right? That kind of drive the work that you do with the board and others. How do you balance, you know, that role that you have serving four masters and multiple masters with doing what's right for founders? And how will your experience in the legislature help you navigate that and help you make decisions around that?
Some really good thoughts there. The relationships I've fought to grow and build in my time in the legislature, I think serve MTC incredibly well. So I think the transition there as MTC's at this unique moment in time where you have a governor who's very focused on economic development. You have a legislature that wants to figure out what that means and how to be focused on it, but aren't really directed towards entrepreneurship. You hear a lot about how do we recruit companies to come to Missouri? How do we incentivize through tax credits and all these things? How do we get companies to Missouri? I just think my ability to go and communicate that entrepreneurs are the net new job creators, founders are the net new job creators in our economy. And as our state stagnates in some ways in our population growth, let's keep our most inspiring people here. How do we develop policy around keeping those founders here? Was something that just made a ton of sense to leverage the relationships I'd built over time into something that made sense going forward. So I think that as I've managed a job or a company and all those things on top of being in the legislature, I just feel like I'm uniquely qualified to manage all those things at the same time. I also have a great relationship with the governor. I was just in his office this morning, had a nice conversation about another opportunity in Kansas City that I hope he'll be involved in here around the World Cup. I love that interaction. I also think that policy-wise, entrepreneurship is one of the most bipartisan policy issues in our country at this time. I'm excited about getting out of partisan politics and focusing on something we can all agree on, which is that entrepreneurs and founders mean a ton to our economy. And how do we build a system that encourages that risk-taking? So I think it all just kind of fits. It all is just a very good fit for me professionally, personally, on a mission. And I also think it's the right time for MTC to have a leader that's thinking in that way. So I think all those things correlate in a beautiful way. And then beyond that, I just love building relationships. So I love driving out here and seeing you and meeting with my board chair who's in the audience and a couple other folks that are involved in economic development here locally. Kansas City has such incredible potential. And so it's exciting to be a part of that too. So connecting all those things is wheelhouse stuff for me.
That's great. You mentioned that it's a bipartisan kind of issue right now, and I don't think a lot of folks would disagree with that, especially even some of the votes behind some of the things that you put forward in the past have been overwhelmingly supported on both sides of the aisle. We have a lot of folks in the audience who are supporting, I think, this message that entrepreneurship as an economic development strategy should get more attention. Why do you think it's been hard to get that kind of traction or that kind of leverage as an economic development? And we were talking earlier about, this work as infrastructure. What do you think has been the challenge to get more people to understand the value of high growth entrepreneurship as an economic development strategy?
In Jefferson City and in Washington, D.C., I think that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. I think founders are focused on surviving. I think they're focused on building a thing. I think they're focused on breaching that chasm of failure and success. And so they're not in Jeff City worried about what the legislature is doing to build a space for them or build ecosystems for them to help them survive. They're surviving. They're fighting to survive on their own. I know this because I started my own company. I quit my comfortable job to do that. And so I know what the knife fight looks like. And especially with a young family, it's a real risk, but it's the lifeblood of our economy. So I think I think there's a lot of connection in that. And there's nobody going to bat for founders in Jeff City because they don't have lobbying groups, they don't have advocates. But these are again the lifeblood of if they're the lifeblood of our economy, somebody needs to be in Jeff City screaming that from the rooftops, because we spend a lot of money on encouraging companies to come here. Like I mentioned before, DED spends a lot of money on tax credits and a lot of money on trying to get companies to invest here. There's not a lot of money spent on the ecosystems. There's not a lot of money spent on the state-backed venture for founders with high-tech, high-growth opportunities. I think there's a real path to sell a vision in Missouri that, especially through MTC, that will encourage that type of behavior.
How hard is it going to be for you individually to walk back into the chamber after they zeroed out the budget? This what we went through in the last budget cycle with MTC, and then you step into this role. What's that going to be like for you to walk back in and have those conversations?
I don't know yet.
Fair.
Because I'm not leaving until after session's over. So, I'm still a voting member.
You still have to walk back in.
Yeah. So people still have to respect me for the moment as a senator. So that gives me some ability to influence what's happening in the legislature. So I don't quite know yet what that's going to look like. But what I've tried to do again over time is build strong relationships where my yes is a yes, my no is a no. People know who I am. I'm a known quantity in Jefferson City. 12 years in the state legislature in Missouri is a long time. It's a very long time in legislative years. So I think when I go into rooms, I think I can command respect that few have the ability to do as they leave whatever they're doing to take on missions. But I think that's going to help MTC for the short term. That won't always be the case, but I think that's going to help a lot as we take this message, not just for MTC, but the vision has to be bigger than just MTC. The governor is not thinking about just MTC. He's thinking, what's the economic development message for Missouri? What are our strengths? What are we spending our resources on? How are you and I partnering together so that we're going to Jeff City with one voice and not several voices? You have your own lobbyist, and I'm going to bat for MTC, and you're going to bat for your own money. How do we partner together so we're all rowing in the same direction on an economic message that makes sense for the state? And I think when we can do that, we have an opportunity for everybody to, all boats are rising with the tide. And that's, I think, the message that makes a lot of sense in Jefferson City, and we have to tell that story.
You talk about the bipartisan nature of the work that, entrepreneurship represents. So the Right to Start Act passed, I think, 117-7 in the House and 31-1 in the Senate.
I'm glad you have those numbers. I don't fully recall, but they were very
I
broadly
got them right
bipartisan.
here.
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of bipartisan margin these days is unheard of in a lot of things. And so I'm curious, what do you feel like had to be, if anything, had to be given up to get that? And what do you refuse to compromise on in those kind of conversations?
I really think at the end of the day, I was, again, a known quantity. I wasn't promising the world. I just had a vision for what direction Missouri could go. I think, again, there's so much space for this bipartisan argument that entrepreneurship is something that we all agree is the American way. Building a company, taking a risk, jumping off a cliff without a parachute and hoping that you can figure it out on the way down. That's the American way. And I think that just across the political spectrum, that resonates. So it wasn't really giving up anything or trading anything. It was just doing the hard work of being in Jefferson City and going to every office where there was influence and convincing people that this is a smart path for the state of Missouri. And I love seeing it play out. It's very hard to get legislation passed in Jefferson City. It took several years. But it wasn't just me. It wasn't just my effort. I had a lot of help. Victor Huang, who's become a great friend of mine with Right to Start. We literally named it after Right to Start. I did it in honor of him. We could have named it anything, but he was just starting Right to Start. And,
Sure.
And so love that we get to name the bill in that form. And now it's gone around the country. Right to Start bills are popping up all over the country, which I'm super proud of. But it's not because of me. It's in large part because Victor Wang and Jason Grill and the team over there. And then we just had a legislature that I think everybody supports entrepreneurs. We want to figure out ways to ensure that entrepreneurs have a place in Missouri and that the state is thinking for them.
You referenced Ian Hathaway a minute ago. So I saw you had just reposted something from him. And I want to ask you, not about that post specifically, but about that concept of Missouri sits in between two coasts that are, VC heavy, venture capital heavy, a lot of density, a lot of, deeper capital markets in some of those louder founder brands, we'll call them. When someone has an idea in, Columbia or Springfield or Kansas City or St. Louis, what's the selling point that you give for why Missouri? And not Austin or San Francisco or Nashville or Boston or some of these other places that might be more attractive to a high growth founder today?
I think the most poignant point I can make to somebody who's considering Missouri is that my own story. And I wasn't born and raised here. I moved here 20 years ago this year, and I really thought Missouri was going to be a launching point. I'd spent a couple years building my resume, working for a nonprofit in Jefferson City, and then that was it. I had really not a lot of interest in living in Missouri other than it was an opportunity for me professionally. I moved here, I met my wife, we started our family, I was embraced by the community. It was the first place I got to choose for myself. We've moved a lot in my lifetime. And so what I found was a place that surprised me. And it was mostly the people, it was the relationships, it was how a community came around me and accepted me, not knowing who I was or not really caring, but just really felt like home. And I think that's what Willie mentioned on the podcast with Ian, Willie Schlacks, who's started Equipment Share, and they've just IPO'd, and they're a big deal for Missouri. It means a lot to us that they're staying at home for Missouri's future right there in Columbia. He said the same thing, and that's why that message deeply resonates with me, because There's something about being at home that people are attracted to, and I think that's what Missouri provides.
You referenced Victor a minute ago. Victor's a friend of Keystone, a friend of mine. I've known Victor for a while. He referenced your appointment as superb, said that you understand entrepreneurs as the primary vehicle for new job creation. It's a big claim. What do you say to a skeptic in rural Missouri that hears the words innovation economy and thinks it's all about Kansas City, St. Louis, and some of the bigger cities? And I know one of the reasons they were looking, for someone like you in the role at MTC is that this has to be a statewide initiative and it has to support all parts of the state. So what do you say to somebody that's in a rural economy right now thinking about innovation?
Drive down the road at harvest time and look at the tractors that are being driven by AI. It's right there. It's in these rural communities. I also think entrepreneurship grows by broadband being accessible or high speed internet. For every, I don't know what the stat is, but for every percentage change in the broadband accessible, entrepreneurship explodes by some multiple of that percent. So the rural nature of Missouri is a benefit to us. And as MTC invest in ag tech and high growth ag opportunities, which we're doing all over the state, and then not only that, but the ecosystems we're trying to build around, I'm going to St. Joe in May, and we're going to talk in St. Joe. They're maybe a little bit more suburban than they're rural, but we have opportunities around the state where MTC has partnered very well, and we have opportunities to partner in the future with our rural communities. And as the legislature goes, the vast majority of our legislators represent rural areas, like me. The vast majority of my district is rural. So I think there's a message there that rural entrepreneurs need to be recognized. They deserve ecosystems. They deserve to be heard. And I'm going to barnstorm the state, and we'll drive all over Kingdom Come and talk to anybody who's interested in entrepreneurship. But I think as we develop a plan for how MTC is relevant going forward, you have to include the rural areas because they're also decision makers in Jefferson City. And if we're going to rely on Jefferson City for partnership in this space, which we have to because we're a public-private partnership, we're more unique than your typical VC fund, then we have to have those connections with the decision makers. And thankfully, we have a governor that supports that, who's a cattle rancher himself, a first generation farmer, but also is like a bulldog on a bone on economic development.
I want to shift to the entrepreneurship conversation a little bit out of kind of the state politics and some of those things. MTC's Idea Fund has three stages of investment that you guys look at today. So, walk us through the investment thesis. When you're looking at, let's just say 100 applications in a cycle, what separates the 12 that get funded from the 88 that don't, from your perspective?
Yeah, I think we have a different perspective as a state-backed venture fund. We're not there just to make money. We're there for job growth, for economic development. There are other data points that we're tracking than is typical. The state, that's the message we have to sell to the legislators. That's the message we have to sell to the local communities, the partners who are helping fill our pipeline. And so I think as we look at it, our due diligence process is much different in the sense that we're trying to figure out what's the highest leverage opportunity from the state's perspective that is also not such a high risk that we're just taking massive gambles, which is a little bit trickier as people want to get our investment. It's a little bit maybe a longer process, maybe a little bit harsher. It's maybe a little bit more due diligence and a little bit more risk averse. But I think we have to be that way with taxpayer dollars. And so it's a little bit different of a view, a different thesis than your VC that's going to be betting on a high tech, high growth opportunities that we want to partner with them on. But we have our own system that we have to respect, and we have to go sell in Jeff City.
Yeah, it's the power law means a lot different thing when you're dealing with taxpayer dollars versus
That's right.
traditional LPs. I definitely understand that. Now, since 2023, I think MTC has awarded over $36 million of grant or money to 112 startups, not grant money, those investment dollars. Sounds impressive. What's the honest failure rate, stacked up against a regular VC? And how many of those companies won't exist in 5 years? Based on this thesis change, what does that do to the kind of investment perspective and how people think about
Well,
this?
when you look at some of the numbers, and I can't give you exact data on every one of those, but our multiple on invested capital is going to look different than your normal VC. We're not looking for a 3x, a 2 or 3x, which most VCs are probably at a minimum looking for. You're going to see that look different, and because our thesis is different, we're investing differently, and so I think it's a different perspective. But the state also, we're lending the credibility of the state to these startups, and I think that's where we provide real value. We also, MTC has to figure out a way to be sustainable over time. We've seen Jefferson City, which is part of this conversation I've had with our board as we talk through this, is we have to come up with a sustainable model that doesn't always have to be at the will of or at the mercy of the yearly budget process. So that's a unique thing to start thinking about too long term, because we have this $95 million state small business credit initiative fund from the federal government that we get to outlay. That's only a couple years, but it's a pretty good start to a state-backed venture fund, a lot of money that we get to lean on. But we have to have a long-term view of where MTC goes from here. And it's not, in my opinion, the smartest thing to do is to continually rely on the legislature every year when that pendulum can swing politically year to year. So we've got to come up with some creative ways to figure out how we sustainably fund ourselves, still be able to partner with the folks that are doing the heroic work around our state to support entrepreneurs, and then take the risk of investing in founders that have real potential.
So I want to talk. I've heard you describe yourself as an entrepreneur, and I want to talk a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey. I think Fitzwater Enterprises.
Yeah, early on, that was a very creative name I came up with.
Yeah, it's original, very original.
Very original. I'm somewhat embarrassed, but also proud. That was a long time ago, and that kind of morphed into Cardia Media, which is what I jumped out on the ledge on in 2023. Quit my job outside the legislature. And by the way, you don't make that much money as a legislator. I have a young family, so I had to support them on top of being on the mission of a state senator.
You're a side hustle guy.
I'm a side hustle guy.
All right.
And so we've just relied on contracts to do some media stuff. This is why I love the podcast. We produce podcasts, long form content, and repurpose that for brands.
That's amazing. So you have a different perspective than maybe some other people that are in kind of either the economic development space or in the legislature, and that you do this, you've done this. So does that change how you maybe think about the positioning of MTC, the positioning of Idea Fund? Does that help you influence maybe others in terms of how they should view this space as well? Does that experience add to that?
I think the empathy helps. Knowing what the grind looks like, and the sleepless nights, and the wondering what that low is going to be. I also love understanding the highs when you earn a contract, or when you hit a revenue goal, or you get in touch with somebody that you never thought you'd get in touch with, just because by nature of taking the leap, somebody said, "Oh, I heard you're doing something new." The conversations that come out of that risk taking. So I think for Jefferson City in particular, there are a lot of business owners, a lot of entrepreneurs, which is great. A lot of people that have no experience in that space. And so having an entrepreneurial background, I can give the perspective, not only to tell our own story, because MTC needs to tell the story of our founders, and we'll rely on that, but to say, listen, I understand what these founders to some extent are going through, and these are the folks we need to really be believing in and investing in. So Jefferson City needs to hear that. Those are the stories that matter for our economy going forward.
So Travis, you've got a role, I think, COO of the Missouri Pharmacy Association. You've been an entrepreneur, you're a legislator, you run a digital marketing company. There's, these different hats that you've worn. What do you think has given you the most unexpected skill that you think will be valuable in this role? I think you've managed a campus ministry. You've done so many different kind of a broad swath of things. What do you think is going to be the most unexpected skill you've picked up in that journey that's going to help you out in this new role?
Being a dad.
Fantastic. All right.
I have 3 daughters, and they're the world to me.
Ages?
13, 11, and 8.
Whew, good luck.
And they're amazing. I think I've just learned a lot of patience. Wasn't a patient person. I think when you have those blessings in front of you, they're really, when you're building all these things, you're doing all these things, you're on a mission. I remember when I was running for the Senate seat 4 years ago, it was a very hard 5-way primary. I was outspent 4-1. Nobody expected me to win, so all my friends in Jefferson City, who told me I should do this, disappeared because they didn't want to be on the wrong side of history. So they abandoned me, and I had this campaign to run on my own. And I remember one night having to drive across my district to go knock doors because you have to relentlessly do everything. And my now 11-year-old, she would have been 7 at the time, was crying and said, "Daddy, don't go." And I had to tell my daughter, listen, like, we're on a mission. Not just me, like as a family, we're on a mission. And so learning how to communicate just to my daughters in patience and what we're doing and why we're doing that, it translates to, as I talked to our team with MTC, as I was on the phone with my team basically the whole drive over here today, it's that, like, selling the mission on a regular basis is what's going to be required to get MTC to the place that I believe it can go to. And so being trained in that constant, like, we're on a mission. This isn't just a job for us. We're on a mission to make sure that founders are getting funded and that the support system's in place for them to succeed. Like, that's a real mission. And just communicating that over and over and over again is going to be one of the biggest things that I feel like I'm going to have to do. And I'm really excited about that. I'm so excited about that. And I think I've been trained not only with my family, but as I've viewed my professional career, especially in the legislature, people want to be involved in that, you know? They don't want to hear what your job is. They want it, like, if you're on a mission, people want to be part of that. And so I've learned a lot from that.
Purpose creates gravity. It sure does. Well, since you brought them up, I got to ask about pizza night. So you and your wife, Amy, homeschool your kids, and you've described pizza night to in other forums that I've heard you talk about. So tell me, do your daughters know what you do? And do they, do they ask questions about, why you're leaving the Senate, why you're doing this, those types of things?
Yeah, a couple things. Well, one, they know what they get from what I do. So they get to come over to the Capitol and visit me. They love that, and I have great snacks in my office, so they love visiting for that. Also, my oldest daughter wrote me this letter that I have framed in my office. It's made me cry. But she wrote a letter through her homeschool co-op where they were like, write a letter to somebody that you want to know what they do. And so she wrote this beautiful letter when she was 9 that's basically like, hey, Daddy, what does a senator do? And what do you want to accomplish? And it's like this beautiful handwritten thing. And so they've gotten to experience the legislature. They've grown up in the Capitol, which is really cool, and something I'm going to miss a lot. And I know my wife is going to miss, my kids are going to miss. But they're also, they love movie night. I mean, it's like just been our tradition from early on. We do pizza and a movie on Friday night. We don't hit all Friday nights, by the way, but the vast majority of Friday nights we get a pizza and movie, and it's been a tradition that's been really sweet for us and really important for our family dynamic.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to talk about technology. I think that's one of the things, we talk about Missouri Technology Corporation, the focus on technology, but what's that mean to the state? So you guys, I think in the January 2026 cycle, MTC funded a company that's building ultra low power AI chips and another one that's building generative AI for predictive model workflows. How does a state venture fund evaluate making bets on those cutting edge technologies? And I think it goes back to a little bit about your answer about how you evaluate these things, but now you're talking about technologies that a lot of people don't even understand. A lot of people maybe are still skeptical about.
Yeah, I spent 20 minutes probably on the road today talking to our portfolio manager on a recent close we had on a hunting AI company we're really excited about. And it's in the space of AI, but it's I think you look at the opportunities that are in front of you in the market that's in front of you. We have technology around AI. You have ag tech that's really significant, and there's going to be one of our board members has some exciting stuff happening around the Yield Lab and what she's doing in St. Louis and around the state and around the country and in South America, which is really, really cool, some of the things she's doing in the ag tech space. You have things happening in Kansas City around health that are really, really inspiring, really incredible. You have the digital space that I think has incredible amount of opportunity. And so I think as you look at it, the state needs to be involved in these things. MTC, what I've sold our board on is that MTC, and I don't think this is not surprising to anybody, but the MTC can and should be the voice for innovation from a state's perspective, from kind of the public view. We should be in Jefferson City constantly talking about how innovation is going to impact beneficially our state. And AI is coming whether we like it or not. Ag tech's coming whether we like it or not. Some of these things are waved. Robotics are coming whether we like it or not. We have a defense budget on the federal government that is diving deeply into investment into the state of Missouri. We need to be on the front end of those things. The spinoffs from that are going to be great. Not to mention our school systems, from Rolla to UMKC to Mizzou, Springfield. I've had conversations with chancellors and deans and Moon Choi and all these folks about how do we partner with the colleges to be advocates and catalysts for the commercializing tech that's coming out of those schools. There's like endless opportunities in the state of Missouri to be involved in, and MTC really needs to be in the front end of that stuff. And we want to partner with those folks and be an advocate for it, not only in Jeff City, but through our state-backed venture fund and the ecosystems we're helping build.
So I was leading a workshop today for the launch KC companies that are looking for corporate engagement. One of the things we talked about was the relationship of corporate venture funds into the strategic goal of a corporation. And so one of the things I'm curious about from your perspective, when we think about the modernization of government, so there's technology as an economic development strategy, and there's technology around building the economy that the state supports. What role can or will, in your opinion, MTC have as a venture fund, maybe helping identify opportunities for the government to modernize and use technology in a different way? Is there a role there? Is there a wall there, or is there an opportunity for that to be part of the focus of an organization like MTC?
Yeah, well, I hope so. And I've actually asked the governor's office to have basically a chief innovation advisor. I think that would be helpful just to be at the table and say, hey, this is what we see happening around the state, first of all. Secondly, there are people in this room that I've had a conversation, Mitch is somewhere, he's still around. We talked about GovTech just the other day on a Zoom call and what he's doing with his startup company and the cities that he's in. So beyond that, just, the state budget is, in all the bureaucracies, we employ 50-some thousand people. We have a dozen plus departments in the executive branch. The state government is huge, it's massive. So I think around AI and the software that we implement going forward as a government, AI can fix a lot of things that I think are really missing around fraud, waste, and abuse that I think that should be relied on, because we want those taxpayer dollars, a significant amount of dollars going into software, and each budget line for each department that is, to the tune of $50 billion a year. That's our state budget. So we should be leaning into innovation to make sure those dollars are going as far as they can.
You think MTC has a role in helping maybe source some of that, or helping at least maybe identify some of those opportunities?
I hope so. We need to be laser focused on a vision and a mission around founders and the ecosystems that support them. But I think there's a space to be a partner with the state that makes sense.
When we talk about entrepreneurship as an economic attraction strategy, one of the things in economic attraction in the economic development space is talent. You've had the opportunity to lead STEM workforce initiatives, STEM education, STEM workforce initiatives in your role as a state senator. Some of those went through cycles of trying to get passed in terms of vetoed, coming back, doing those types of things. Where do you see the misalignment of some of the workforce development timelines and initiatives and things in the startup ecosystem and how it moves and how agile it is and the needs that it has? Where do you see the opportunity to maybe align some of those things in a better way from your seat?
It's a great question. So I love that you're in the same building with Goodwill, Another bill that I helped pass back in around, I want to say it's 2018, was the adult high school bill. And it partners with Goodwill around the state. There's one in Kansas City, there's one in Columbia, St. Louis, Poplar Bluff, Springfield. And there's half a million adults in the state of Missouri don't have a high school diploma, which is wild. 10%, nearly 10% of our population. And they get to go back, if they go back to these schools, it's paid for by the state. You get child care, you get local workforce development training, you get the opportunity to meet with entrepreneurs. I think it's workforce development. It's saying we have a lot of potential already here in the state and believing in that potential and developing it into the next entrepreneurs. Because one woman that I got to meet with, she never believed that she had the capacity to be a useful part of society in the job market. Just totally mentally broken because she had a hard life, single mom, just had to fight and claw for everything for her family and her kids. Kids are finally out of the house and she says, you know what, I'm going to just try this thing. I've got a friend who did it. That friend can do it. I can do it. And when the mindset shift, when somebody realizes that like they're in control of their own destiny, and then the potential spigot that you turn on as a result is inspiring and it's incredible. And so this lady now is building her own business, finishing her degree. She's a mentor and helps work in Goodwill. After she graduated, she's become a leader and a mentor in this space, and she's inspiring other people to do the same thing. And I think it's that type of stuff, is believing in the potential we already have and giving them opportunities to get out on the workforce and make a way for themselves. That's what entrepreneurs do all the time. And I think that's the type of workforce development that, like, we open up those opportunities, people are going to see that, oh, if I can do that, I can start a business, I can start a company. And then hopefully we can come in and support them well.
I want to shift a little bit into your personal kind of leadership philosophy and maybe some personal reflections on kind of where you're at right now. So, you're the variety of roles that we've talked about already that you've had. You're now, the organization you lead isn't huge. We've talked about that it's a lean organization like a lot of the ESOs in the state, but you're somewhat becoming a de facto leader of the entrepreneurial ecosystem and the ESOs that are around the state. Tell me about your leadership philosophy. Tell me about kind of your beliefs as a leader and things that maybe you've picked up along the way that are going to influence how you lead in this role.
I think real influence comes from serving others. I think as you look at great leaders, and I always use I don't want to get religious, but I use the example of Jesus. This was this human that walked the earth, and he gave this example, and he's the most influential person that's ever walked. I mean, I look at that, and I think, what principles can I learn from that? And it was take care of people, care about them more than you care about yourself, say no to yourself and yes to others. I think there's a lot to learn in that. And I'm not good at this, by the way. I'm like 99.999% of the time, I'm incredibly selfish and want to do my own thing and want to go after my own things. But I think if we can get out of that, and we can think of how do I help others achieve what they want to achieve, that will help me achieve what I want to achieve. That's a mission worth fighting for. And so for me, it's always been about service, whether it was campus ministry when I got out of college, whether it was working for a pharmacist for the vast majority of my professional career, whether it was running for office and going out door to door and saying, hey, I want to serve you, I don't want to serve myself. And then the technology corporation, it's just an opportunity to serve others. And I think that is a worthy thing to spend my life on. And that's really where everything else kind of tends towards from my perspective. Now, again, not consistently, not all the time. But when I can get in that space, I can get really jazzed about what I'm doing, because when I'm serving others, I think I'm right in the middle of where I need to be.
When you think about leading in this role that you're stepping into, have stepped into and are in the process of putting both feet in the middle of, what do you think that people in Missouri, people in the ecosystem have misunderstood about MTC or mischaracterized about MTC that as a leader you want to change that perception or move that needle?
I think however it needs to happen, and I don't know if it's, I don't know why, and we're not going to look backwards, but we all need to row in the same direction. I mentioned that earlier. And I want people to believe that as I've driven over here in the last couple weeks twice to see you and spend time with you and your team at Keystone, I want you to believe we're on the same team. And this only works if we're all on the same team. We only go to Jeff City and make a dent in the universe if we're on the same team. So we'll have disagreements, we may have fights, those should happen behind closed doors, but I think if we can all row in the same direction, if we can always all fight for the same, at least the same general vision, I think we can really move the needle here in the state of Missouri. And so I'm going to go around and try to convince everybody who's either been a partner or has wanted to be a partner, has been turned away as a partner throughout the state, that we may not be able to provide the resources, but we're here for you. We're with you. We want to be with you. And if people can move past whatever's happened in the past and kind of see that we're endeavoring to build those strong relationships and be an advocate for them, we hope they'll be an advocate for us. We think in that scenario, MTC and the state and the ecosystems that support our founders can really get somewhere.
One of the more amazing entrepreneurial programs in the nation and now in the world was actually founded in Missouri, 1 Million Cups. At the end of every 1 Million Cups session, one of the things that they ask is, what can the community do for you? So I'm curious, as you think about this listening tour that you're on right now, as you think about your role in MTC, what can the community do for you and for your organization to help in what you're describing here?
Yeah, I think Aaliyah's in here somewhere. Aaliyah.
I think she left.
Did she leave already?
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about her anyway.
All right, perfect.
Produce more Aaliyahs. She's terrific. I think just people that want to connect with us, that want to be a resource, want to help fill our pipeline with founders that they believe will be a good part of our portfolio. If it's a good part of their portfolio, we hope that it'd be a good part of ours. So, make connections with us. Also, I would recommend, just knowing what I know about the legislative process, I would highly recommend that everybody in this room builds a relationship with their legislators. So your state rep, your state senator, we're much more accessible than you may believe. For the most part, there's some that are really terrible human beings, so it may be a little bit harder, which you may be surprised by.
That's going to be a second episode, I'm telling you right now.
Yeah, we'll name names in the next one. But I would say go out and find out who your state rep is. Go out and find out who your state senator is. Take them for coffee. Build a relationship, because at some point you're going to need them. You're going to want them. You're going to need them. And you'd probably be much better off if they like you when you're not asking for something than when the first time they meet you is when you're asking for something. And that goes much further for me as a legislator when I have a relationship with somebody. I had an appointee today that's her parents have meant a ton to me in my political career. And I loved going up on the platform of the Senate committee and recommending her, because I have a relationship with her and I know her family, I know her parents, and I know where she comes from. So I'm elated to be a part of her process of getting confirmed in the Senate process. That stuff matters, and so build relationships with your legislators. It's a lot easier than you think it may be. It just takes that discomfort for a minute to get in a room with them.
COO, state legislature, nonprofit leader, campus ministry, now this. What's the through line? What's the thing when you look back on this you want to have said kind of stitches together and defines kind of what you've done?
We were on a mission. I think that just drives me. You got to be able to wake up in the morning and not be bored and not be like wondering what's the next thing. I think I just want to get to my life and to the end of my life and say I was on a mission and I built strong relationships, and the ripples of which will have an impact over time.
We have this saying going around Kansas City right now, we're in an incredible time, and there's this optimism around the sports teams. But certainly with the World Cup and some of the things that are happening, it's an exciting time to be here.
Yeah.
I think we all want to, what's next? So we're excited to see what you do. We're excited, no pressure, lots of pressure. We're excited to see what you do. We're excited that you're in the seat. And I'm appreciative that you're here. It means a lot to our ecosystem that you're here tonight. So thank you for doing that. and for supporting entrepreneurship. I mean, like I said, there's folks in the room that support entrepreneurship as an economic development strategy, have been advocating for that and trying to strengthen the voice behind that. And so to have someone that has this experience in the legislature that can help us with that voice, I think I'm very appreciative of, and I know a lot of folks in this room are. So thank you. Would love to have you back and talk about, over in points of time, like how it's going, what's changing, bring news back to the ecosystem. I think that's one of the things that we're all looking forward to, as well as how do we continue the dialogue and continue the communication pipeline back. So
I love it. And, my board chair's in the room, Alan Dillingham here in the back, and he's a fierce advocate for these things too. And he's here. So, he's right down the road, and I know he would be very interested in continuing these talks here locally on being close. But all those kind words mean more than you know.
Well, Travis, thanks. Thanks for spending some time with us. Everybody, Travis Fitzwater, give him a hand.
Glad to do it. Thanks.